Hi friends, host Eric here, host of Talking with Famous People. I'm here with Abraham, I'm here with Susie. We're in Talking with Famous People 1, the conversation topic for all parties who are watching in the live stream, who wish to come and join and talk to us directly, or me directly, or whomever directly, or who wish to comment in the live stream chats. Well, for those of you who wish to do any of those things, welcome, and you're welcome to do those things. Like I said, appear.in/TWFP1 is where we are. You're welcome to join if you'd like. We're talking about NFs, and particularly ENFJ, INFJ, INFP, and ENFP. What's the difference between these types? Why do they sometimes display so very differently? And if feelers are all about ethics, why can some of them be so super cunty sometimes? Good questions, everyone and all. Let's answer them now. So, when talking about your intuitive feelers, I think the first most important matter of business is to distinguish between the NI intuitive feelers and the NE intuitive feelers. They're very different creatures, and while they're both feeling feelers in the sense they have a feeling preference over a thinking preference, that's not nearly as much of a similarity as the more important matter of whether they have the subjective or objective metrics. TE is a lot closer and able to interact more successfully with FI than FE is with FI a lot of times. So we start off with your NE versus NI. That's one factor. And what does it mean in terms of which kind of F you have? Well, if you have NE and you have an F before a T, then that means you're going to be FI. And the reason is, if you're ENFP, then you start with extroverted intuition, and the second function is either introverted thinking or introverted feeling. It's got to be an introverted function. So you can't have extroverted thinking, and you can't have extroverted feeling, so you have introverted feeling. If you're an INFP, you start with your introverted function. So again, the F is FI, not FE, because you're starting with the introverted function. And the second function is NE. So FI and NE go together if you're talking about intuitive feelers, and FE and I go together if you're talking about intuitive feelers on the other side of the equation, the NFJs, as they're called in MBTI. So ENFJ and INFJ, they either start with NI, like INFJ, and then follow up with FE, because their introverted function is an epistemology function, so their second function is going to be the extroverted judging function. Or they start with the extroverted judging function FE, like ENFJ does, and follow it up with NI. So it's interesting, worth noting that there are no extroverted intuitive, extroverted feelers. They may have extroverted feeling and extroverted intuition, but if they do, then they are going to be an ENFP like me. They're not going to have FI. So there's a number of reasons why you might think that would be the case, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that because in both those cases you're talking about an action function, metaphysical action, NE, or a knowledge function, metaphysical knowledge, NI. And the reason why you don't have can't have NEFE, just besides just the mechanics of it, is that if you had an objective action function followed up by an extroverted objective judging function, then well, I guess it's just too much extroversion back to back to back. I'm not sure why you can't have FE followed NE. I'm not sure why it would necessarily be the case that you couldn't, except obviously there's a need to process the external world. So if your manner of attention is external, first and foremost, your second one needs to be processing that external data in some way that is at least can be rendered internally, and is primarily like, there's lots of TI I don't ever talk about or reveal. There's lots of stuff I hold close to me too. Shit that I'm like, well, I'll wait for somebody to make that mistake before I say this. I do that to a certain amount, but you wouldn't really guess it. You think basically everything I think I say because I talk so much. It's not really true. My TI is still an introverted function, and ultimately it keeps its own counsel inside and has various things going on that it doesn't talk about necessarily. So, okay, that's why you have to have an introverted function thing. But regardless, ENFPs have FI, first NE, then FI. INFPs have first FI, then NE. INFJs have first NI, then FE, and ENFJs have first FE, and then NI. How do these types differ? How do they display differently in terms of their behaviors? Like, if you were to look into the world and see somebody interacting with others for 5 minutes, what would you see in each of those instances? Well, let's say 30 minutes. So we have a bit of more data sample. You're just watching two people interact. One of them is an INFJ. What would you see from that INFJ? Well, you'd probably see the other person doing more of the talking, unless the other person is more extroverted than the INFJ. But if the other person is more extroverted, you see the INFJ probably asking a few questions, allowing the other person to talk about themselves, and then following up with questions that are designed to provide the other person a chance to tell things about themselves they want to tell, because of course that makes you like the INFJ. Now the ENFJ, in contrast, is going to feel much more like they're in charge of FE. So when you deal with an ENFJ, INFJs have a way of tricking you into thinking that you're special, and the INFJ thinks you're special, and oh, by the way, I almost forgot, I somehow think the INFJ is very special too. INFJs have a way of ending a conversation with everybody thinking those things. ENFJs, not necessarily. ENFJs are much more forceful in their assertions in general, because they understand the FE as a singular matter, like the INFJs do, but they see the FE aspect of it as predominant. And so when you get an ENFJ who goes, I don't like the way this is playing out socially, I don't like the FE here, they're likely to be vocal about it, or they're not going to sit there and maneuver things in the way the INFJ does. They will stand on FE heuristics that they can count on, things that Abe can count on too. I see Abe stand on his FE heuristics sometimes and be like, look, Eric, it's just bad FE. You gotta fucking buckle down and acknowledge that it's just bad FE, and that's the more important point now. He doesn't say it in exactly those terms or those words, but that's what he's telling me periodically, because as an FE user, he says, okay, fine, I get everybody uses different things, but for fuck's sake, you are being so awkward and terrible right now in some regard. So the FE Dom, ESFJ is less domineering in that fashion. ENFJ is more domineering in that fashion because they're endowed with the singular right best way. Okay. So, but regardless, the two FE users are going to be much more in tune with your perceptions. The NFJ is likely, certainly at first, to play a much larger role in your conscious understanding of other people than will the NFP. The NFP wants singular, personal, private relationships with one other person or groups of other people, but they want everything to be singular and particular and unique and distinct based on that FI experience of relationships developing over time. But they're not likely to make such an impact on somebody with whom they aren't developing a close relationship. They tend to be quite distant with people that they aren't close to in a way that FE users are not. INFPs will seem hard to get to know. It might seem like you think you understand them, and then all of a sudden they're very different, and they're blah, blah, blah. Well, so they're hard to get to know because, one, they're very slow to warm because they have FI as a dominant function followed by NE, which means, of course, that they understand relationships takes time and they want those relationships to warm over time. ENFP is going to be very different though, because ENFP is going to have NE first and be fundamentally an action person, whereas INFP is going to be fundamentally a subjective judger or a valuer or an experiencer. Most FI experiences are subjective valuing experiences of physical manifestation of value from metaphysical objects. If you learn your dog died, you feel sad. And of course, there's mental anguish that goes along with it as well. But the INFP is acutely aware of all the weights of the various emotions. And an FI user has a big disadvantage in life because FI is structured such that bad feelings are worse and more memorable and count more than good feelings in general. And there's a reason for that, obviously, because bad things, there's more of a need to avoid bad things than there is a need to find good things, for simply as a survival modality, right? But as a consequence, it means your FI users tend to carry with them the weight of life. The one possible exception of all the FI users in the whole typology spectrum might be ENFP, because they take metaphysical action first and then deal with it in terms of how they value things and whether it feels good to them or feels bad to them, or whether it can, how it's going to affect a relationship or a series of relationships, or how even it might be perceived by others. But it wouldn't be FE kind of perception. It would be like, this is, I can feel my own authenticity of this, so I expect others to feel it as well. It would be kind of like an ENFP approach to FE. Keeping in mind, INFP is ignoring FE is likely to be better at FE ultimately in certain contexts than ENFP, who countervalues it and may argue against FE values. So these are some of the distinctions you can make between INFP and ENFP. And you'll note that ENFP is much more likely to be mistyped as ENTP than they are to be mistyped as INFP, because NE up front is very fucking different than FI up front. And it's very different than NI up front or FE up front. Now, for the ones who have the perceiving function up in the front, ENFP and INFJ are going to seem more intuitive to NTPs than are ENFJ and INFP. Did I say ENFP and INFJ are going to seem more intuitive to intuitives than are ENFJ and INFP, because they have the intuition function first, whereas the latter pair have the judging function first. So ENFJ, INFP are going to seem less intuitive for a couple of reasons. For amongst intuitives, ENFJ is going to seem to be priority locked. They're going to feel priority locked, at least for an ENTP. Like they can't get out of their NIFE priorities. But I mean, that doesn't mean that's a bad thing. But I worry about ENFJs in general because they got 7th slot SI, which means they're never attending to their self and their own comfort, because they're always focused on managing perceptions and the singular right truth of that, and then executing it, 3rd slot SE. And by the time they get down to their TI, they're like, it's consistent enough, fuck it. And they're like, oh shit, I have frostbite on my hands. How long have I been standing here in this freezing weather? I haven't eaten in 3 days. I've got SI polar. I'm externally focused with other people, and my intuition is about objective knowledge. I don't know my own body. So, you know, that's one of the things I think ENFJ has to struggle with, is knowing who they are subjectively, as well as knowing who they are as a relation to objective truths about society and stuff like that. Okay, so now that we've established the ones that seem more intuitive to other intuitives are probably INFJ and ENFP, and the ones that seem more rigid to perceivers anyway are going to be the two judging ones, ENFJ and INFP. It should be noted that of those two, INFP is going to seem more intuitive in general than ENFJ, because INFP, they have SE polar, which means what they do is muse about their feelings, relationships, possible ways that things might play out, possible ways that could affect them or not affect them, and they spend a lot of time feeling their way through problems that they are determined to eventually come to some sort of decision about, at which point presumably they will take some sort of action. But that's a long way down the road. However, I feel better for them with SE polar than I do for ENFJ with SI polar, because I think that there's a lack of self center, a lack of centered self that the ENFJ has to overcome. And I don't think INFP has to overcome that at all. I think INFP is amongst the most clearly authentic self people. The problem is you're unlikely to see it unless you get inner circle. So, okay. Back to the original question. If you were to watch these people for 20 minutes, how are they going to behave? INFJ said, ask some questions, set the tone like that. ENFJ, probably delve into, your shit. Like, so how's it going with Kimberly? Blah, 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 blah. And then get a read on it. And if they think there's actually something, there's a FE disconnect or something, they'll try to solve it. They'll try to offer advice and or assess and or provide you a sense of like, oh, or whatever you need, commiseration or whatever.
This is very true.
Now,
I agree with this.
So those are how those two types would display. The INFP would display probably as very quiet, wouldn't have a lot to say. If the INFP likes you, you'd be able to see or sense that as they sort of radiate their positive emotions at you. And you can see them smiling. You can sort of feel the, oh, you're smiling at me because you like me. Is that relevant? I'm pretty sure that's not relevant, but I like it. So, if the INFP likes you, you probably walk away from the INFP conversation, you having said less than usual, them having said almost nothing, and you going, am I in love? With in the last one, which is the ENFP, it's going to be a lot like hanging out with an ENTP, except they're never going to challenge you on TI shit. It's not like they don't value it or can't hang at all. I mean, they got better TI than ESFP by a million miles, but you just won't encounter TI shit parsing out. Once there's a TI objection, most of the time ENFP, if you make a good objection, is going to go, oh yeah, maybe you're right about that. They're not attached to their perspectives either, as long as it doesn't touch on sacred feelings stuff. You're not dealing with their loved ones or personal relationships that are really tight and long lasting, then you're fine. They're not attached to shit. However, ENFP may have a difficulty getting into and sustaining relationships, long-term relationships, because unlike ENTP, who has the blessed benefit of 7th slot FI and thus must come up with some alternate way of understanding which relationship is good or bad, besides feeling, ENFP is going to default to the feeling issue in terms of understanding which relationship is good and bad every time, and it makes them mercurial. It's like they're not really sure about this relationship. Why not? Well, because it's not a logical decision for them. It's a feelings-based decision, and their feelings are constantly changing. How much they value may increase over time predictably. They may be able to understand the value of the relationship will grow as their feelings grow, but it doesn't change the fact that it renders them functionally impotent to do anything until those realities manifest. Okay, so we've talked about INFP. What would they do? They'd probably say nothing, but you feel a little bit in love. ENFJ, what would they do? They'd figure out what's wrong with your shit going on and try to fix it. INFJ, they'd ask you questions so that you think at the end, wow, I sure am smart answering those questions. He was so interested in what I had to say. I like that INFJ. I think I want to hang out with him again. And then the last one was, ENFP. It's going to be like an ENTP, but you're never going to have arguments about TI shit. It's a lot of riffing off of ideas, back and forth, joking around, maybe talking about art. When I talk to Nefertiti, for example, she and I, if we were alone in a room, we could there would not be 1 minute of silence over 8 hours. We just go back and forth continually. Oh my God! Oh my God! Blah, 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 blah. It's like, it's like kissing cousins. ENFPs. I like them a lot, or sometimes I fucking hate them because some of them do their ENFP shit about like politics and stuff, or about stuff that you can't just like. Well, today I think we should vote for everyone has to wear a hat. That'll be fun. And tomorrow, who knows? And it doesn't matter if I don't know the definition of any of these words. I have strong opinions about them.
Eric, look at Fergus.
Who's Fergus?
Look at Fergus the cat.
Oh, that's Fergus?
That's a cute cat.
Fergus, do you have a question about INFJs, INFPs, ENFJs, or ENFPs?
Eric, I want you to assess that cat's personality type based off of its body language.
It's a bitch. I don't like that cat.
That's a cute cat.
All right, let's see if there's anything in the live chat. No.
No, nothing. I'm looking.
Okay, thank you. If somebody puts a comment or something, you let me know.
Yeah, I'll get it.
If you are watching this, I don't know if you are or not, but if you are, then, and we're still live, then you can come join us here if you'd like to. And I will answer any typing questions. I will type you if you want. I will tell you that you're an INFP if you'd like me to tell you that, even if you're not. My one promise today, it's a special bonus. If you come and you say, I'd like you to tell me I'm an INFP, I will tell you that today, even if I don't think it's true. Abraham, would you like me to tell you I think you're an INFP?
I'm sorry, Eric. I'm infatuated with this cat right here. It's a beautiful cat.
Hello,
Hey,
Arrival. How
what's
are
up,
you
man?
today?
I'm alright.
Is this Alex?
Yes, it is.
An INFP appears.
Here's an INFP. Yes. So, it's good to actually have an INFP in the mix here. We haven't had any of the types I've been talking about here. We've had ESFJs, Abraham. We got INTP, ENTP, me. Here's an INFP. The intuitive feelers. Do you feel, as an INFP, camaraderie with any of the other three intuitive feelers more than the other ones? For example, do you feel more like an ENFP? Do you feel more like an INFJ? Do you get along better with INFJs than ENFPs? Or do you get along better with ENFJs than INFJs? Or do you know? Can you give us any insight on that?
Well, I don't know any of my close friends as what their types are or anything. But
You
I
need
know-
to type them all, and you need to force them to accept their types that you give them. Okay, you go, no, you're ISTJ. You start acting like it. It's the best way to make friends.
I was confused. I was like the INFJ recently, but only because of the introverted intuition. And I always feel like I'm in like a weird state. So I don't know.
Well, what do you think introverted intuition is, or how do you think it's distinct from extroverted intuition? What's your understanding of it?
So yeah, recently I was watching like a bunch of videos on introverted intuition. So it's saying it's kind of a logical mechanism, but it's the way, I guess, it's looking at the big picture and connections between maybe unrelated ideas, or I don't know. But,
People describe it very badly. My
Okay.
description is better. Right? It's the objective epistemology. We have different ways of knowing things, right? We have our own knowledge that we get from like subjectivity or whatever, from our own experiences. Like, I remember earlier when I pounded in that fence post, I learned something today. If you want to pound a fence post thing in and you're hitting the wood, it might split. And if you've got, so it's good to put a replacement piece of wood to hit and then take that out to put the real piece of wood in. But here's the thing I learned. You hit it really hard and it splits a million times, then you can't fucking get it out of the thing. I had to like chip it to get it out of the thing. So anyway, that's a personal experience and personal learning, SI learning for me. NI learning is different from that. It says, I understand systemically the way that things are. And so I will wait until the right course or the right thing to do or say comes to me. So it's like, if you think of a hunting analogy, as an any hunter, I go to the forest in my big 4x4. I've got multiple guns. I've got cannons. I've got bows and arrows. I've got spears. I've got poison gas. I've got landmines. I'm going to hunt some animals today. Okay? And then I go into the forest and I just let everything fly. Fuck you, animals. I'm coming to eat you all, motherfuckers. Throwing landmines, poison gas everywhere. And at the end of the time, I've got a big pile of dead animals. And probably like 2 of them are good to eat. The rest of them turned out are animals you can't eat because they taste awful or they're poisonous or something. But I shot them all anyway because what the fuck. Now, NI, Hunter, he goes to the forest and he waits and waits until the deer walks in front of him. And then he shoots it. And then he eats his deer. I'm eating a deer too. We're both eating a deer. Mine came with a lot more collateral damage.
See.
There's a slower, it's holistic. If they wait for enough pieces of a puzzle to come into play, then they'll intuit the rest of the puzzle and the whole solution will fall into place for them. But they have to wait for all those puzzle pieces to land on the field as objects, and then it'll collapse. Whereas I'm like, what do you mean objects landing on the field? I make all the objects on the field, of course, because I'm an EDOM. It's not better or worse. It's just any is doing in little bits, a bunch of little bits, what NI does in one big bit. But that's why NI is an epistemology or knowledge function, because unlike NE where you're taking action and making ideas that might be or whatever, NI knowledge is treated as knowledge. That is to say, here's something I know just as clearly as I know my name is Eric, and it is so because I can know its truth inherently in the same way that I know my name is Eric is true. Why? Well, for me, SI, because I remember it. But if for an NI user, they go, well, it just is. And then if they turn out to be proven right again and again, people go, ooh, mystical. But it's not mystical. It's just that the human being has the ability to intuit aspects of things that one can't figure out because the system is too complicated. You can still intuit correct guesses about how things are going to be because that's just what human consciousness does. It has to make guesses and stuff like that based on their approximate static representation of fluid reality that can't actually be represented.
True.
Okay, well, obviously, tonight is hair washing night for a lot of the NFs. They did warn me about Thursday nights being set aside for their hair. However, I'm hopeful that once the color and the rinse, the conditioning and the rinsing again is over, some additional NFs will join us for a delightful romp through their conscious minds and psyches. As part of this, host Eric analyzes you, intuitive feelers. Come join. For the moment, I'm going to pull a bong rip. Susie, tell us a story about when you were a little girl and your dog got stolen by a mean boy.
I never had a dog. But do you want to do the thing where you want people to come in for typings?
Those.
Yeah, but then we should restart and remove the Cunty title.
Oh, you think that's why? That's bad.
I don't think people want to join authentic and being super Cunty. Like, I don't know.
Well, I was trying to be like, which one of the 4 intuitive feelers is actually can be super cunning? But I didn't really play it well. Okay, fine. Thanks for watching. If you're watching the live stream, we're gonna live stream again. I'm opening the floor. I want to type any and all cover. I'll give you a full assessment, type and subtype. I need to practice this subtyping assessments that I'm starting to work on in my head. This will help me to put it together. I don't have it all on paper or anything, but I will eventually. You know, I have to. That's the TI part that doesn't necessarily get exposed. Is the part where I'm working through shit. That's why it seems like I have the answer because I've already done the working through shit in my head. It's not like I'm that quick. Okay. Hi, Poppy. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to eat plenty of cheese, and we're going to follow Susie's advice.